Because if I'd only had 4 hands, I'd been like, well, this is going to be a bust. Did everybody get this number? 414-710-4549? Take that down because I'm fixing to erase it in just a second. But what I want to talk about today is, for just a few minutes, is what I look at as the Bermuda Triangle of marriage. And y'all know what the Bermuda Triangle is? Where planes vanish, ships vanish, things like that. Life has a way of creating traps that you can kind of vanish in. And you end up trapped, and you end up broken, and you end up desperate and sad and lonely and depressed and things of that sort. And I personally do not believe that life should be that way. I don't believe that God put us on the earth to be miserable. So how many of you are hoping to marry and make the person you marry absolutely miserable? Raise your hands. Some of you guys just raise your hands for anything. I mean, none of us start off a marriage and find this girl that we love and say, you know what, I'm going to get her, I'm going to make her miserable. I'm just going to torment the daylights out of her every waking hour. And I heard this well before I got married. My mother actually told me one time, whatever you think is cute is going to get on your nerves really quickly. And so I tried to find somebody that wasn't cute. So I looked for beauty. And what I mean by that is she was a beautiful girl, and I loved her dearly from first sight. We've known each other since we were, I'll mess this up, 6 and 9. All right? Oh. Julio and Juliet or something like that. I don't know. So we've known each other since we were kids, and then I ran off and dated a bunch of other people, and she ran off and dated a bunch of other people from 6 and 9 up until the time that she was 18 and I was 21 when we got married. But there was something beautiful about Mickey beyond her looks. There was a spirit there. There was a desire that was common. So we talked a lot. I remember sitting in front of 7-Eleven, starting to cry. It's crazy. But I remember sitting in front of 7-Eleven in my 72 Nova that had no air conditioning in the middle of the summertime with the windows down. I bought a car without an air conditioner, live in Texas. I was desperate for a car. But somebody's asking me to send them an airdrop here. So it's weird. But I remember us sitting there and us asking each other questions. What do you think about this? I mean, what do you think about work? What do you think about the way we're going to have jobs? Do you want stuff? Do you want nice clothes? Does that matter? Do we want nice cars? Does that matter? Do we want a home, or do we want to rent an apartment? And this was well before we got married. We had those discussions, and they were beneficial because we got married understanding kind of what we wanted. And we had some common goals that we didn't know how to set goals at that time. None of that kind of stuff. It wasn't like I was a goal freak at 21. I was an idiot, actually, at 21. Was asked to leave school at 19, so that tells you anything. So, you know, we set out on a path, though, to build something together in our marriage. So don't get infatuated, if that's the right word, right? Infatuated? Don't get infatuated with looks, and don't get infatuated with cheap talk. Find out how they're wired. Look at their mama and look at their daddy. They're wired just like them. All right? Now, my wife will tell you that she's more like her daddy than her mama. Right? Is that right? No, that's a beautiful thing, by the way. Her mother was a piece of work. We loved her to death. She passed away last year before last, but she was an amazing person. I loved her to death, but boy, was she a character. And Mickey's not anything like her mother at all, period, end of statement. All right, she's her dad, in some ways. But she's a lot like my mom now. She kind of took on a bunch of my mom's traits, and her prayer life and some of the things I see mirror that. So you can learn behavior once you're married. All right? You can start modeling ways that you don't want to be. I mean, you can start looking at people that you don't want to be like in your family, in your gene pool, and say, I don't want to be like that. And guess what? You can change. You know, this garbage about, well, I'm just like my daddy, bless God. He beat my mama, and I'm going to beat you, you know. If that ever happens, I would like to find you. But I don't think we have to think that way. I think if we've gone through a serious childhood, horrible family disruptions, and all those kinds of things, you can make decisions to live a fruitful life and a beautiful life. And you can live a beautiful life in spite of crisis, pain, anguish. You can still live a beautiful life. It's what you make up in your mind you're going to do. All right? So I want to show you a little model. During the time that I was trying to figure out surrender, I was asking the Lord to show me what surrender looked like. And that's a crazy question. But what had happened was through divine intervention in our life, supernatural intervention, the Lord spoke to Mickey and gave her a word of what he was fixing to do in our lives. He didn't talk to me. He talked to her, which was lesson number 1. Because I couldn't understand for that whole week why he didn't talk to me. Why would he tell her this stuff about me? Why didn't he just tell me? I couldn't listen. And I had so much noise I couldn't hear. But he had a message for us. So he gave it to Mickey. She gave it to me. It was amazing. But at the end of that message that the Lord gave her, he told her that this weekend when you're over in Lake Charles at Brother Rick Treese's church, Brother Rick Treese will confirm this word. Very specific. And I thought, there is no way God said that. Doubting Thomas, right? Well, guess what? That week, I won't go through I did it with these guys, told them what happened. But at the very last moment, he hands the service to another preacher. I'd gone through Sunday morning, all morning, Sunday evening. He didn't preach. And I know, well, he don't have a word for me. Hands the mic to the guy that was going to preach, goes and sits down, gets up, comes back, taps him on the shoulder, takes the mic from him, and says, the Lord's talking to somebody here tonight, and literally almost verbatim said what the Lord told her. But then he said, you will not have revelation until you surrender. And he said, revelation, how do you say it? Something about obligation. There's an obligation to having revelation. I could read it. It's on my phone. I look at it all the time. But it was amazing. It was in complete parallel to what the Lord had given her, and in fact used Moses in the exact same way that the Lord gave it to her. And I collapsed. I literally just sat down in the pew and cried the rest of the service. And all the way home, we left right after the church was over with and drove back to the farm about 3 hours. And we were in Sulphur. I remember when I looked at her and I said, I don't know what surrender looks like. I've been in this my entire life. I was 53 or so when that happened. I've spent the better part of my life in business, crazy stuff, great success, great failure, and then great success again. It was crazy. I told you all about failure last night, but I didn't tell you about the success side. We crashed. I started a business up in 81. It went from $1 million to $3 million to $9 million to 17 to 21 to 36, chapter 11. Crashed. Took me 2 years to get out of that. It went from 15. It went from 36 down to 15 during chapter 11. It went from 15 to 70 in 5 years. And then it went from 70 to 136 million in 3 years. So we went from great success to horrible failure, from being a genius to a village idiot, as I said last night. Trust me, everybody wants to be around you when you're making a lot of money. You fail, those are not your friends. You couldn't have found those people with a microscope. They were not to be found. They left. But the reality is God's been good, and he's continued to be faithful. But through all of that, had we not built our marriage and our relationship on a solid foundation, I wouldn't be here right now. We would be divorced, no doubt. But I'll tell you what happened. When the business failed, and the business, I didn't know this until I was trying to work through surrender, and I realized that the business was an idol in my life, and I had to give it to God. And it was very difficult. It wasn't easy. It took me a long time. But when I came home and told her that we were fixing to lose everything we had, and we had accumulated a lot fast, I was a junkie for stuff, cars, Mercedes-Benz. We both driving them, brand new ones. And I traded every year. I had 27 cars in a matter of, how long? I don't know. It wasn't long. 7 or 8 years. Stupid. Then I bought 13 antique cars at one time. Joseph Kennedy's Pierce era touring car. I mean, just the car he bootleg whiskey in. It was important to me at that time. It's junk. It's just junk. It meant nothing. When you hit the bottom, you can't even give the stuff away. It's insane. I walked in, told her we were losing everything. Never forget it. She and Amber were standing at the back door. She was putting clothes in the washer. And I walked in. She said, "You okay?" I said, "No." I said, "We're fixing to lose everything we have." And she said, "What are you worried about? We didn't have anything when we started anyway. Let's just go back and move in your mom and dad's trailer." I thought, sweet. So the last thing I wanted to do is move back in a mobile home. I'd worked really hard to get out of that life. But the reality is, had we not had that relationship, and she trusted in me and I trusted in her, she could have said, "What? I can't. How do I lose all this stuff? What is everybody going to think?" No. She said, "All that matters is me and you and Amber at that time. Let's just go back to the trailer. Let's give it all up. Start over." We didn't have anything anyway. That's a special person. All right? You can be that person. And you're going to have the opportunity, by the way. There will come a moment in your life when you have to make a decision. Am I going to stick this out? Am I going to make this work? Are you? Those of you that are married, am I lying? No? I'm telling the truth, am I not? You're going to get a chance. Put up the next slide. So this is where it all starts. Work and family. And that yellow thing represents balance. And so when we got married, and I've got to rush along here. When we got married, I had a good job, and I wouldn't get married till I had a good job. I'd gotten the advertising department at Safeway, and I was making $5.10 an hour, so I thought I was rocking. $5.10 an hour. And so we could get married, and I had insurance, and we could have a baby and all that stuff. We never thought about the baby thing until it happened. But it was good that I had insurance, put it that way. But anyhow, long story short, I was absorbed in my work, and here we get married. And suddenly, I'm wanting to start an illustration business on the side at home. So she worked with me to convert our garage, a one-car garage in a little town called Galena Park, Texas, into a studio. And I started working at night in the studio. So I would come home from work and work. So real quickly, I realized that I was possibly going to create a problem. That my absorption with success and wanting to grow and work and all this stuff was going to get in the way of our marriage. So we had to start working through that and start trying to find balance. And it was not easy. I will tell you that. It wasn't easy for her. It wasn't easy for me, but we made it through that. But then what happened, we'd been married a little while. Both of us had kind of stopped going to church while we were dating. Our church had split. If y'all ever been through one of those? Our church split, and it made it real convenient for us to go to other churches, and I went off to college, and so it was kind of an easy time to kind of back out of things. So we had kind of stopped going to church regularly, and so we figured out we needed to get church back in our life. Hit the next slide for me. So what happens is that you suddenly bring in this third element to your marriage, and it's called faith, or God, and it seems like that would be a very easy thing, but then you start trying to juggle this going to church, living for the Lord, wife, work, and it's not easy. It's not easy. If anybody in here says it's easy, I think you're lying. Because I've tried to make it easy and I can't. All right, it's difficult. You have to really work at it to make this work. But what we do, we start accumulating. All right, so I'm going to just go ahead and load this thing up. Hit the next slide. I normally take 3 weeks to teach this whole thing, okay? So, but I have 15, 20 minutes here. So you have to work with me. Let your imaginations run wild here for a second. So what happens inside this triangle, this is why I call it the Bermuda Triangle of life, we start putting in pride and plans and money and friends and dreams and time, absorption and other things, and then we bring in family and in-laws. If you could get married without in-laws, it would be amazing. But it doesn't work that way. But then you see purpose kind of shaded back there. We start with that first. If you looked at this, if you saw me teaching this over a couple Sundays, you would see that I put purpose in first because we always start off with the best intentions, don't we? We always start off saying, we're going to do this right. We're going to have this done right. But what we start doing is putting stuff in there. And then entertainment comes into this thing. All right? And we start watching movies. We start entertaining ourselves. And this was before cell phones was really a thing. And then what happens as you have some success is consumerism gets involved in this. You start buying stuff and accumulating and accumulating and accumulating. Hit the next slide. And what can happen is this thing gets out of control to the point that anxiety sets in. You can't sleep. You can't worship. Let me tell you something. If you're debt-laden, if you've got a lot of debt and you come to church, it's hard to raise your hands. If you're having trouble paying your bills every week, it's hard. It's difficult to come and worship. And if you're arguing about money, it's doubly hard. All right? Because then you feel like a hypocrite for raising your hands when you and your wife just fought about money coming to church. Am I telling the truth? So it's ultra critical where you're at right now. And I'm just trying to get a point across, okay? It's ultra critical that you're highly careful, if I can call it that, about who you marry. All right? And keep in mind, you want to complicate this even greater is have an argument about that faith issue. Have it now. Don't have it after you're married. Don't marry somebody outside this church. All right? Okay. There are cases where somebody's married somebody outside the church and they've come into the church. There are cases. There are also cases that they've married them outside the church and they're lost today. All right? What's the value of your soul? Choice is the currency of eternity. Write that down. Choice is the currency of eternity. Think about that. All it takes is one bad choice. One choice can mess up eternity for you. All right? So be careful. I'm not trying to scare you away from marriage. I think it's the most beautiful thing that has ever been created. God knew exactly what he was doing. It's wonderful when it's good. It's horrible when it's bad. All right? Hit the next slide. So what happens now when you're trapped? What do you think happens? Somebody give me an answer. You're in a marriage. All hell breaks loose. Literally. You start looking for an escape. Affairs. Pornography. Divorce. Who said that? Who? You want out of it. You want out of it. And people escape. It's fight or flight. You know, the old syndrome. And they'll fight. And yet the reality is it doesn't solve it. All you're going to do is take that same brokenness to some other marriage or some other person, and you're going to end up going from person to person to person. We know a person, very good friends of ours. We were best friends with them. We had no idea anything was going on. We had been together with them on a Sunday night, after church, and one week, during the week, Mickey called me like on a Wednesday at work, and she said, she left him. They're getting a divorce. I'm like, what? That's not possible. I mean, they were in our youth group. We came up together. They got married. They had a great marriage, I thought. Something was badly broken, and they were masking it. She's now gone on to, I don't know, 5 marriages. Count them. She's still miserable. She now lives alone, I think, right? She now lives alone. Raised kids in that mess. So we begin with the best of intentions, but it can quickly go bad if you don't manage what you're putting into this trap. All right? So it's critical that what happens is the further you go with this triangle, the more stuff you keep putting in it, the more layers you put on it, the deeper you get, the more trapped you become, and before long, it's miserable. You're just miserable, and you try to get out of it. God's called us out of this, but what do? We ask God to come in and fix this mess. We create it, and then we expect him to come fix it. But guess what? The only way to fix it is for you to start dismantling it. To sit down and say, this isn't working. We're fixing to get rid of some stuff. You know, we're getting rid of credit cards. We're going to work really hard for the next year, and we're going to get rid of some of this debt. We're going to pay some of this off. We're going to get out from under this. All right? And then we're going to live a different life when this is over. We got ourselves into this. I was part of it. What we do, though, as guys, we say, if you hadn't have spent so much, we're stupid, by the way. That's probably the stupidest thing you could ever say out loud. Even if you think it, keep your mouth shut. Does that make sense? You guys hearing me? I'm trying to help you. I'm not trying to hurt you. Just shut up. Just don't say anything. Be quiet. All right, next slide. Surrender, next slide. All right, so a surrendered life, and I'm going to wrap up here. What time is it? We got 5 minutes. This is good. I actually made it. All right, I got to look this way. Mine's too small. From consuming to creating and consuming to giving, this is what a surrendered life looks like. From fearing man to fearing God, from my will to God's will, from the pursuit of man's abundance to God's abundant riches and glory and power. From a body with a soul to a soul with a body. That one line right there can change the entire way you look at life for the rest of your life. If you think you're a body with a soul, your soul was there before your body was. And your soul's going to live on when your body's decayed and gone. All right? If you'll think of you as a soul with a body, this body is dispendable. It's going to die, it's going to go away, but our soul's going to live on. What's the most important part we should be taking care of? The soul. Surrendering to cosmos or surrendering to Christ? And cosmos is the world. Dabbling in the Spirit to Spirit living and dwelling in you. Be careful dabbling in the Spirit. Being called to engaged and consumed, to go. Passive in the kingdom to active in the kingdom. From ineffectiveness to effectiveness. That's what surrender looks like. That's what surrender looks like. It took me 2 years to figure it out. How's that for ignorance? I was desperate because God had spoken to me and said, you won't have revelation until you surrender. And I was desperate for revelation. I'd been praying for 3 years for revelation privately. Nobody knew it. I'd never told a soul I was praying for revelation, but I'd studied my whole life, and I wasn't getting revelation out of the Word. I was getting lessons. I was teaching a lot of lessons, but no revelation. I wasn't getting anything. And when that man stood up and said, you'll have revelation if you surrender. I surrendered, and when that happened, I'm telling you, the Lord has been faithful and has continued to pour revelation out, and it has been amazing. It's an amazing journey. but you've got to surrender. You have to surrender. All right, so we're going to take a quick break and come back. You got a bathroom break. It's 11 o'clock. So I'm gonna ask you to be back in 5 minutes. Can you use the restroom in 5 minutes? Go.